Good day. This is Len Lazarick with MarylandReporter.com. And with us today are Bryan Sears from Patch.com and Joel McCord from WYPR. Thanks for being here. And we're going to discuss the governor's legislative proposals, which he laid out in his State of the State address. And before that, does he have any chance of getting any of this package through, Bryan?
I think he's got a lot of tough battles on his hands. I mean, starting with same-sex marriage, the flush tax, I think, is even going to be difficult. I think these are all going to be tough, and it really is going to, as Senate President Mike Miller pointed out, some of these may really be won or lost on whether or not O'Malley decides to spend more time trying to get his agenda through the House of Delegates and the Senate, rather than spending a lot of time doing the Democratic Governors Association work.
The Republicans are speculating. People are trying to figure out this ambitious agenda and whether he really expects us to get through. The Republican theory is that he's just throwing these things out there for a national audience. Do you think that's true?
That's what we keep hearing from just about everybody we talk to. He's throwing this out for a national audience. In some ways, yeah, I'm certain that's true. I'm also figuring he's got this year and maybe next year to get something big done. And the year after that, his last year in office, we know it's an election year, and nothing happens in the nothing that's liable to annoy anybody happens in the General Assembly in an election year. So he's got 2 years, maybe only one, to get something done.
And you have to assume that he really does want to get some of these through. They're not. Nobody sets themselves up to fail. I mean, he wants to be able to have a couple of solid wins that he can, so that if he does have, as Republicans say, this national, this eye on some kind of national level, career move, he's got to have something to hang his hat on, not just to say, I put a couple of bills in, they didn't pass, but I did them.
But you wonder, because the gas tax, applying the sales tax to the gas tax, would that is 6% over 3 years, would get it to a level far beyond anything that anybody has talked about as a proposal. And does he really expect to get that, or does he expect to get 2% or 3%, or?
It's hard to say what he expects to get, but everybody knows that when these kinds of proposals wind up in the meat grinder of a General Assembly committee, that they'll come out a whole lot different than they were when they came in. So it's a pretty good guess that he realizes that this 6% over 3 years is a real tough ask. And that's what he said in the State of the State. This is a very tough ask, and I understand that. But maybe he figures, ask him 6%, maybe I get 2.
And there's still a lot of Democrats and Republicans and Democrats who are saying that before they can even start talking about whether it's going to be 2% or 4% or 6%, they want to know that there's going to be some kind of guarantee that the money is actually going to go where they're being told it's going to go. And then that brings up the whole issue of whether or not we're going to have some kind of a lockbox. And E.J. Pipkin, for example, earlier this week said, he called it a fantasy. Said he doesn't believe in the concept of a lockbox.
Well, actually, Rob Garagiola and the Senate Majority Leader and 21 other sponsors put in a constitutional amendment for a lockbox that seems pretty restrictive. Pipkin again calls it a gimmick, but also the more progressive Democrats see the sales tax and the gasoline tax as a really regressive measure because it applies to everybody that drives a car.
Right, the poorest people would keep paying that tax, as well as rich folks like you and me.
Yeah. And speaking of rich folks like you and me, then we have the income tax, where he talks the high earners will pay more, and he set the bar at at $100,000 a year for single people.
Well, in all fairness, what the governor said was the high-end earners would get less back in their tax returns. To you and me, that means you're paying more. But to be honest with you, the spin on this is that they would get less back.
Well, not to argue with you, but I think in the speech he actually did say pay more. But in general, he frames it that they'll get less back in their refund, as if the state is giving you back your own money in your refund, right? Money that you pay.
Right.
Right. So, yes.
Then they'll get less back, yeah. But the thing, I think, the problem he has is that $100,000 level. Everybody that I've talked to says that's too low. It has to be higher than that.
Even the Senate president has signaled that he's not a fan of that and wants it to be higher. And so the problem that you get with that is once you start changing that formula, you've then changed all of the formula related to these teacher pensions that are being pushed down on the counties. So if you raise the level at which you're going to tax, and you define these high earners, you've now changed the formula on how much money the counties are getting offset the first year. And to be honest with you, most of the county executives that I've talked to don't believe they're going to see any of this money anyway.
And once you start changing that formula, then it's just this domino effect that you have to find some more places to cut, or come up with some other taxes or some other revenue or some other cuts.
And the Maryland Association of Counties even has, doing the out years, shows that this brings in less money than they're promising for the counties. So they're essentially stuck with the bill. And my impression is they're going to fight that tooth and nail, right?
That's what I've heard.
And then we come to the flush tax, which is kind of separate because it goes into a special fund, which again is not protected, but at the very least the governor is proposing doubling it, and for people who use a lot of water it's going to be even more than that.
Well, Sue Almond calls it the more you poo, the more it'll cost you, Bill. And for really first of all, you're talking about doubling essentially the $2.50 to 50 cent per month fee to $5 for people on septic, and going to a usage fee for everybody else. I think even for people who supported the flush tax, there were so many taxes that were discussed in the state of the state. What the governor called, the tough choices that had to be made. I think that there's still a lot of delegates and senators that I talk to whose heads are kind of spinning, and they're trying to figure out which ones they can support. And I'm not sure even for people who supported the flush tax the last time that it's something that they can do this time because of all of the other things that are coming out this year.
I don't know whether you noticed, but I was in the back of the chamber during the State of the State speech, and there were a lot of applause lines at the beginning, and he was thanking people and he was honoring veterans, and then he got to the tough choices part, and it struck me that the chamber was just silent.
Dead silent. I had started to count applause lines, and then all of a sudden I went, I haven't counted anything in a while. Whoa.
And there were Democrats that gave him a standing ovation at the end, but still, all the things that were brought up, and among the things, I actually forget whether he brought up the internet tax. I don't think he brought
He didn't
up.
mention.
Yeah,
it
it was not in the speech.
It was not. It was not in the speech. But there's the internet tax, and something that the Republicans noted. Somebody pointed, that it would take a Republican to notice that he wanted to apply the sales tax to the purchase of gold and silver coins. It only raises $3 million a year. So we have less than 70 days left in the session. Which of these things is he going to get done?
I think gas tax is probably some form of gas tax is probably realistic. I don't know whether it's going to be 6. If there's no kind of a lockbox, maybe it becomes a coin flip. But I still think that's really going to be an issue. Same-sex marriage is still in play. I mean, although I'm being told they still don't have the votes in the House yet. But I think that's gonna come down to the wire. The rest, I just think it's too soon to tell.
Yeah, it really is. And as I said, it will all change so much by April the 9th that you might not even recognize half of these proposals.
Yeah, well, that's what one Democratic delegate told me. Well, we will see down the line how much more Maryland taxpayers and their representatives are willing to pay to balance the budget and to pay for transportation projects. Hard to imagine that all of the package can pass, and the gas tax hasn't been raised in any form in
Since
20
Don
You,
Schaefer.
you know, maybe one thing that we didn't talk about that he might be able to get almost everything he's asking for is these 750 pages of regulations that he removed and repealed. We haven't seen these regulations. We don't know what they do, but I would say that's a pretty good chance that he'll get most of that, just so that they can say that they repealed something. But again, we don't know what any of these are, what they actually do.
And we
until
actually
see the bill.
haven't seen the detail on the gas tax yet.
Right.
either.
So
There's no bill, so here we are talking about things that
we know nothing about.
That we know a little about, but we only know what the governor has said, and legislation is actually in black and white and puts it there. Thanks to Bryan Sears from Patch.com, Joel McCord from WYPR, and I'm Len Lazarick for MarylandReporter.com. Thanks for watching.